A mafia boss sees a poor woman wearing his old necklace. What happens next will shock you. A ruthless boss walks into a greasy diner and freezes. On a broke waitress's neck hangs the one thing stolen the night his world burned. He takes her under protection. The streets erupt. Snipers, black SUVs, a little brother who needs medicine. This is no rescue. It's a cage made of glass and guns. But then, something strange. The necklace isn't just jewelry. It hides a secret that points to a traitor inside his own crew, and a past link between the girl's family and his enemies. Every step pulls them closer. Forced rides, locked doors, a gala with smiles that bite, a dock at midnight where one wrong move means a body in the water. If the truth inside that necklace explodes, will the monster of this city burn it all to save her? Or will loving him be the one mistake that destroys them both? The neon sign of Rusty's Diner cast a sickly red glow through the rain-streaked windows. Mara Lark wiped down the same counter spot for the third time, her fingers trembling slightly as she gripped the damp rag. The vintage necklace felt heavier now against her collarbone, its diamond and onyx pendant a constant reminder of how sideways this night had gone. 8 hours earlier, it had just been another double shift. Now she was caught in something that made her stomach twist. The way Adrian Vitale had looked at her necklace, like he'd seen a ghost, still chilled her to the bone. His voice had been soft, controlled, but carried enough menace to make her regulars scatter like scared pigeons. "Just need to close up, Nate," she called to her brother, trying to keep her voice steady. He sat in his usual booth, homework spread across the scratched Formica table. "You sure you don't want me to come with you?" Nate asked, his teenage face pinched with worry. He'd walked in during the worst of it, right when Vitale was making his invitation clear. "No way! You need to take your evening dose and get some rest." Mara forced a smile. "I'll handle this." She pulled the thrift store receipt from her apron pocket again, studying the faded ink. $25 for what was apparently a Mafia heirloom. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so terrifying. Outside, rain drummed steadily against the diner's roof. The black SUV had been parked across the street for the past hour, its engine running, windows tinted to mirror darkness. Vitale's men, watching, waiting. Mara's hands shook slightly as she counted out the register. The stack of bills was thinner than usual. Most customers had fled when Vitale walked in, but at least the diner's note was paid off now, even if the method made her skin crawl. "Mara!" Nate's voice was quiet. "That guy! He's dangerous, isn't he?" She met her brother's eyes in the smudged mirror behind the counter. At 16, he was already taller than her, but tonight he looked young and scared. "Yeah, he is." No point lying. To Nate, he was too smart for that. "But I'll be careful. And hey," she managed a wink, "I've dealt with worse than some fancy suit who thinks he can push us around." Thunder rolled outside as Mara finished her closing duties. Chairs up on tables, floors swept, coffee maker cleaned. Each task felt like ticking down to something inevitable. She hung up her apron and retrieved her worn leather jacket from the back room. The receipt felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. Whatever this necklace meant to Vitale, she had proof she'd acquired it legally. That had to count for something. "Your sugar level's okay?" she asked Nate, shrugging into her jacket. He held up his glucose monitor. "Steady at 110, I'm good." Mara checked her phone. 11:47 p.m. Time to face whatever waited in that penthouse. "Lock up behind me," she told Nate, handing him the spare key. "Take a cab straight home. I put fare money in your backpack. Text me when you get there." "But no buts." She squeezed his shoulder. "I'll be fine. This is probably just some misunderstanding about the necklace. Rich people get weird about their stuff, right?" Except Adrian Vitale hadn't seemed weird. He'd seemed lethal. The way he'd scanned the diner like a predator, how his men had positioned themselves by the exits without being told. The precise manner he'd pulled out his phone and erased the diner's debt with a few words, demonstrating power as casually as breathing. Mara grabbed her umbrella from behind the counter. The ancient thing had more duct tape than fabric, but it would have to do. "Promise you'll be careful," Nate said, following her to the door. "I don't like this." "Hey, your big sister can handle herself." She tried to inject confidence she didn't feel into her voice. "Remember when Tommy Peterson tried to steal your insulin money last year? Pretty sure he still can't walk past the diner without crossing the street." That got a small smile from Nate. "Yeah, but Tommy Peterson wasn't a mob boss." Same principle. Mara checked her phone again. 11:50 p.m. "I'll text you updates, okay? And I've got the pepper spray Dad gave me before he..." She swallowed. Well, I've got it! Thunder cracked again as she unlocked the diner's front door. Rain immediately spattered the worn welcome mat. Across the street, the SUV's headlights flicked on. Mara touched the necklace one last time, drawing whatever courage she could from it. Funny how she'd bought it to feel brave, and now it was the reason she needed bravery most. Right back, she whispered to Nate, the words almost lost in another rumble of thunder. She stepped out into the rain, hearing the lock click behind her as Nate secured the door. The umbrella did little against the downpour as Mara crossed the cracked sidewalk. Water collected in the potholes, reflecting the diner's neon sign in broken red ripples. She kept her chin up, her stride purposeful. Whatever waited in that penthouse, she'd face it on her feet. The SUV's engine revved softly. Mara gripped her umbrella tighter and walked toward it, each step measured and deliberate. She might be scared, but she wouldn't show it. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Behind her, the diner sign buzzed and flickered, casting uncertain light through the curtain of rain. Ahead, the SUV's door opened, and a large figure stepped out holding an umbrella of his own. The neon from Rusty's sign cast sickly shadows across the wet pavement as Mara trudged toward the alley. Her phone screen glowed dimly. 6% battery and dropping. Perfect. Just perfect. She pulled up the rideshare app, fingers trembling slightly as she entered her destination. The rates were surge pricing, but anything was better than stepping into Vitali's car. The app wheels spun, searching for drivers. A car engine roared to life behind her. Mara whirled, heart hammering, as a rusty sedan came screaming down the alley. The headlights blinded her. 2 doors flew open before the car even stopped. Dark figures rushed toward her. Masks, black clothes, moving fast. The necklace, one growled, reaching for her throat. Mara's self-defense training kicked in. She drove her knee up, catching the first attacker in the groin. He doubled over with a curse. The second one grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. Just give it up, bitch! He snarled in her ear. Tires squealed at the alley's entrance. The SUV she'd seen earlier burst in, cutting off the sedan's escape route. Men in suits poured out, moving with military precision. The man holding Mara cursed, something cold pressed against her ribs, a knife blade. Then Adrian Vitale was there, his expensive suit incongruous in the grimy alley. He moved like a predator, all controlled violence. His hand shot out, catching the knife wielder's wrist before the blade could plunge into Mara's side. The crack of breaking bone echoed off the brick walls. Vitale's men had the first attacker on his knees, arms wrenched behind his back. In the struggle, something glinted on his finger, a ring with an ornate S. Vitale saw it too. His expression hardened further, if that was possible. Distant sirens wailed, growing closer. Someone must have called the cops. Serranos, Vitale said, his voice arctic. He turned to Mara. Where's your brother? Still inside, she managed, trying to stop her hands from shaking. How did you get him? Now! Vitale nodded to one of his men. These 2 were just the advance team. There will be more. The diner's back door burst open. Nate stood there, backpack clutched to his chest, eyes wide at the scene before him. Both of you, in the car, Vitale ordered. The Serranos won't stop. You're safer with me. Mara wanted to argue, but the knife on the ground and the broken-wristed man whimpering at her feet made a compelling case. She grabbed Nate's arm and pulled him toward the SUV. The vehicle's interior was all leather and subtle lighting. Nate pressed close to her side, his breath coming quick and shallow. You okay? She whispered, checking him over. Did you remember your... Insulin's almost out, he admitted quietly. Vitale's head turned slightly. Of course he'd heard. Marco, he said to the driver. The pharmacy on 35th. Now. The SUV pulled smoothly into traffic, leaving the sirens behind. Mara watched the city blur past, trying to process the last 10 minutes. The attack. Vitale appearing like some dark guardian angel. The way his men had moved, practiced and lethal. The pharmacy's lights were harsh after the dim car interior. A nervous-looking pharmacist was waiting when they pulled up. Mr. Vitale, he stammered. What can I... The boy needs insulin, a month's supply, best quality. But sir, without a prescription... Vitale's stare could have frozen hell. Did I stutter? 5 minutes later, they were back in the car, a bag of medical supplies between Nate's feet. Mara had tried to protest when Vitale handed over his credit card, but he'd silenced her with a look. Your pride isn't worth his health, he'd said quietly. Now they rode in tense silence through Chicago's glittering downtown. Mara noted how other cars moved aside for them, how even police cruisers found somewhere else to be. The SUV pulled into an underground garage beneath a towering glass building. Instead of parking, they drove straight into a private elevator. "Your security team has been briefed," one of Vitaly's men reported as they rose smoothly upward. "Buildings locked down, extra patrols on all access points." "Good." Vitaly checked his watch. 12:40 a.m. Sweep the penthouse again anyway. The elevator opened directly into a stunning apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Everything was steel and glass and stark modernist furniture. Beautiful, but cold, like its owner. Vitaly turned to Mara as his men dispersed through the space, his eyes locked onto the necklace, still gleaming at her throat. "Until I find out who last wore that necklace," he said, voice quiet but implacable. "You don't leave my protection." Mara felt the weight of those words settle over her like chains. She'd walked into this penthouse on her own terms, yes, but now she wondered if she'd ever walk out again. Nate's hand found hers and squeezed. At least they were together. At least he had his medicine. She tried to focus on those small mercies as Vitaly's men secured the space around them, their movements precise and practiced. Outside the windows, Chicago sparkled like scattered diamonds on black velvet, beautiful but treacherous, just like the necklace that had brought them here. Adrian's safe room looked more like a luxury hotel suite than a bunker. Thick carpets muffled their footsteps, and recessed lighting cast a warm glow over leather furniture and mahogany panels. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and something spicy. Some expensive air freshener, probably. A silver tea service appeared, carried by a silent woman in black who poured fragrant Earl Grey into bone china cups. She draped a cashmere throw over Mara's shoulders before disappearing. "Whoa, check this out!" Nate's voice drifted from an adjoining room. Despite the late hour, he'd perked up at discovering what appeared to be a fully loaded game room. "They've got everything in here." Adrian watched him with an expression Mara couldn't quite read. "He can play whatever he likes. The room is soundproofed." At 1 a.m, Mara wrapped her hands around the teacup, letting its warmth seep into her cold fingers. Better than dwelling on what happened outside the diner. Adrian's tone was matter-of-fact. He settled into the chair across from her, his movements fluid and controlled. "Now, tell me about the necklace." Mara's hand went to her throat, touching the cool stones. "I bought it at Thrifty Treasure on Halstead, about 3 months ago." "How much?" $40 plus tax. She almost laughed at how absurd that sounded now, given what the necklace apparently was. "It was in their vintage jewelry case." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Has anyone followed you since you bought it? Watched you? Asked about it?" "No, nothing." Mara shook her head. "It was just a pretty necklace that made me feel, I don't know, stronger somehow." "May I?" He held out his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Mara unclasped the necklace and handed it over. Adrian produced a jeweler's loupe from his pocket and examined the clasp with intense focus. "There." His finger traced something microscopic. "A serial number and maker's mark. I have the full inventory from my vault. This matches." The word vault hung in the air between them. Mara set down her tea with unsteady hands. "You mentioned your fiancé?" Adrian's face went blank, a mask sliding into place. "The night my vault was breached, several family heirlooms disappeared, including this necklace." His voice turned to ice. "Sophia was found in the vault antechamber. She'd been shot execution style." Mara felt sick. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't." Some of the hardness left his expression. "But now you understand why finding this necklace matters. It's our first real lead in months." From the game room came the muffled sound of explosions and Nate's delighted laugh. The normalcy of it felt surreal against their grim conversation. "I'm still not comfortable being detained here," Mara said, lifting her chin. "Detained?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. "The Serranos tried to kill you over this necklace. They'll try again. This isn't detention, it's protection. And I suppose I should just trust you. You saw what happened in that alley. If I wanted to hurt you, we wouldn't be having this conversation." He had a point, but Mara wasn't about to admit it. "So what's your plan?" "At first light, we go to the thrift store. My security team will sweep the premises and interview the staff. We track the necklace's path backward until we find who brought it in." It was logical. Still, Mara hesitated. "And Nate?" "Stays here, protected." Adrian stood, his height somehow more noticeable in the intimate space. "I'll show you to the guest suite. You both need rest." The suite proved to be larger than Mara's entire apartment. 2 bedrooms, a shared sitting area, and a bathroom with a shower that probably cost more than her car. Adrian pointed out the security features: panic buttons, reinforced doors, direct lines to his team. There's a secure refrigerator for Nate's insulin, he added, opening a cleverly hidden panel. Temperature controlled, battery backup. The combination is 4739. Mara blinked at this unexpected thoughtfulness. Before she could respond, Nate bounded in, finally showing signs of fatigue. "This place is insane," he announced, flopping onto a couch. "Can we live here forever?" "Get some sleep," Adrian told him, almost gentle. "You're safe here." Guards took up positions in the hallway as Adrian led Mara to a private balcony off the main room. The city spread out below them, a glittering tapestry of lights and shadows. Wind whipped at her hair, and she shivered despite the cashmere throw. Adrian shrugged out of his suit jacket and settled it over her shoulders. The fabric was still warm from his body, carrying a trace of his cologne, something woodsy and expensive. "Sleep?" he said, his voice unexpectedly soft. "I'll keep the wolves at the door." Mara stood there a moment longer, watching the city's constellation of lights. Then, without acknowledging his gesture, she went inside. The jacket's warmth followed her, a reminder that in this dangerous new world, she wasn't entirely alone. The morning sun sliced through floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the penthouse's steel countertops into mirrors. Mara watched the housekeeper, Maria, she'd introduced herself, arrange fresh fruit, pastries, and what looked like made-to-order omelets across the kitchen island. Her stomach growled, betraying her. After the night they'd had, she should be too stressed to eat. But the spread looked like something from a cooking magazine, and she hadn't had dinner. "This is amazing!" Nate was already demolishing a plate of strawberries and cream cheese Danish. A sleek tablet propped against his water glass displayed calculus problems. "Look, Mara. Mr. Vitale got me access to this super advanced tutoring program. It adapts to how you solve things." Adrian appeared in the doorway, impeccable in a charcoal suit despite the early hour. "Education shouldn't stop because of circumstances," he said simply. "Eat. We leave in 30 minutes. Mara forced herself to take small bites of an impossibly fluffy omelet, hyper-aware of Adrian's presence as he checked his phone and spoke quietly with his security team. The domesticity of the scene felt surreal against the memory of last night's violence. "Adrian." A new voice, smooth as aged whiskey. A man in his 50s stood at the entrance, designer shoes gleaming. Everything about him radiated polish and power, from his silver-threaded hair to his Italian leather briefcase. "Luca." Adrian's tone cooled slightly. "You're here early. I wanted to check our security protocols personally." Luca Romano, Adrian's consigliere, Mara remembered, smiled at her and Nate. "And meet our guests, of course." His gaze fixed on the necklace at Mara's throat. Something in his intense focus made her skin crawl. "The protocols are handled," Adrian said shortly. His jaw tightened. "We're heading to the thrift store shortly." "Ah, yes, thrifty treasure." Luca's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Fascinating how such a valuable piece ended up there. May I?" He reached for the necklace. Adrian stepped between them. "We're running late. The security detail is waiting." The tension crackled until Luca stepped back with a slight bow. "Of course, I'll review the footage when you return." 20 minutes later, they descended to the garage in 2 groups. Adrian insisted Mara and Nate ride with him in the lead SUV, another vehicle following close behind. The convoy moved through morning traffic with practiced precision. Thrifty Treasure was just opening when they arrived. Mrs. Patel, a tiny woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner, recognized Mara immediately. Yes, the necklace. Beautiful piece." She nodded vigorously. "You bought it? 3 months ago? Maybe little more?" "Do you remember who donated it?" Adrian asked. "From donation box." Mrs. Patel disappeared into her office, emerging with a worn logbook. "Weekend volunteer sorts those. Here, that batch came with men's suits. From a state sale broker going out of business." She pointed to an entry, but coffee had splashed across the page, making the name illegible. Adrian's security team photographed it anyway. "We need to see your security footage," Adrian said. "Camera in back room only." Mrs. Patel led them to a cramped office with ancient monitors. Not best quality, but keeps teenagers from stealing. One of Adrian's tech experts connected a laptop to the system, scrolling through timestamps. They found the relevant weekend, a blurred figure in dark clothing dropping off boxes after hours. Download everything, Adrian ordered. Mrs. Patel will need copies of all donation records from that period. While his team worked, Mara wandered the store's aisles, touching familiar racks. This place had been her secret weapon for years, finding Nate's school clothes, her work shoes, little treasures that made their apartment feel like home. Now it felt tainted, connected to murder and mob wars. Time to go, Adrian said softly behind her. His hand brushed her lower back, steering her toward the door. The touch felt protective rather than possessive. They were halfway back to the penthouse when one of Adrian's men spoke sharply into his radio. A motorcycle had appeared in their rearview mirror, keeping pace despite their evasive turns. "Hold on," Adrian ordered, then spoke rapidly in Italian to his driver. The SUVs executed a series of coordinated maneuvers, splitting up, doubling back, using delivery trucks as screens. Mara grabbed Nate's hand as they took corners at alarming speeds. Finally, the driver gave an all-clear signal. "Serrano Scout," Adrian explained grimly. "They're getting bolder." By noon, they were back in the penthouse's false safety. Mara watched Nate settle in with his new tablet, chattering excitedly about advanced physics programs. She touched the necklace that had sparked this chaos, mind-racing. They couldn't stay here. No matter how luxurious the cage or how genuine Adrian's protection seemed, they were still prisoners. And the longer they stayed, the deeper they'd be pulled into this dangerous world. Mara slipped into the guest bathroom, phone clutched tight. She opened her messages to Lena, her oldest friend, and typed carefully, "Remember our code word from college? Pancakes needed tonight? Both of us." The response came quickly. "Safe house ready. Text when." Mara deleted the exchange and took a steady breath. After dinner, when guards might be slightly more relaxed, she and Nate would find a way out. Lena's couch wasn't fancy, but it was free of mob politics and blood feuds. She rejoined the others, playing her part. Adrian was deep in discussion with his security team, analyzing the footage from the thrift store. He glanced up as she passed, something unreadable in his eyes. For a moment, Mara almost felt guilty about her escape plan. Then she remembered Luca's predatory interest in the necklace, the motorcycle tale, the weight of undefined threats. No matter how compelling Adrian's protection was, she had to get Nate to safety. She sank into a chair, pretending to read while her mind mapped exit routes. Just a few more hours of playing along, of living in this glittering fortress. Then they'd disappear into the city's shadows, leaving the necklace and its deadly mysteries behind. The dining room gleamed with understated wealth, crystal glasses catching light, white linens, pristine. Mara picked at her pasta, watching Nate gesture animatedly about the advanced physics problems on his new tablet. "And the tutor says I can take early college credits if I keep up this pace." His eyes sparkled with excitement. Adrian nodded, his attention split between Nate's enthusiasm and subtle glances at Mara. She recognized the vigilance behind his polite smile. The man missed nothing. When dinner wound down at 8:15, Mara touched Nate's shoulder. "Time for evening insulin check, buddy." In their suite, she quickly packed essentials into a small duffel while Nate used the bathroom. The spare insulin pen from earlier went into her pocket. Her heart hammered, but her hand stayed steady. "Ready?" she whispered at 8:20. Nate nodded, understanding without words. The service stairs were poorly lit, emergency signs casting a sickly green glow. Their footsteps echoed, despite careful steps. 3 floors down? No. Alarms yet? Maybe they'd make it. The alley door opened with a soft click. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and garbage. Mara scanned for Lena's car. Something red danced across her chest. Time slowed. A dot of light, precise as a jewel. Her mind refused to process it for one crucial second. "Down!" A security guard appeared from nowhere, tackling them both as concrete exploded near Mara's head. The shot cracked through the alley like thunder. Radio chatter erupted. "Sniper! Northeast rooftop!" "Serrano colors confirmed! Target acquired!" More guards materialized, forming a human shield as they hustled Mara and Nate back inside. Nate's breathing came fast and shallow. Mara clutched him close, her own pulse roaring. Adrian met them on the 6th floor, his face carved from ice. Only his eyes betrayed the fury beneath his controlled exterior. He personally escorted them back to the penthouse, one hand at Mara's elbow, grip firm, but not bruising. "Building lockdown," he ordered into his radio. "Full sweep, all access points. I want those shooters found." In his office, Adrian poured 3 fingers of whiskey, but didn't drink. He stared out the window, shoulders rigid. You need to understand what you're dealing with. The necklace, Mara said. They want it that badly? The Serranos have hunted these pieces for months. Each one connects to something bigger. He turned, expression grave. They'll use you to get it. They'll use Nate. The truth settled like lead in Mara's stomach. She'd thought she could slip away, dissolve back into anonymity. But the red dot on her chest proved otherwise. There was no running from this. I can't risk Nate, she whispered. No, Adrian agreed. You can't, and you won't have to. He crossed to her, movements deliberate. Whatever else you think of me, believe this. I protect what's mine. Right now, that includes you both. Hours ticked by. Security teams reported in. The shooters had vanished, but Adrian's men found shell casings with Serrano markings. The message was clear. They were watching, waiting. Nate finally fell asleep around 11, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. Mara tucked him in, smoothing his hair like she had when he was small. Just before midnight, she stood in the guest bathroom, gripping the marble counter. The woman in the mirror looked exhausted, shadows under her eyes. But the knots in her stomach were loosening, replaced by grim acceptance. They were safer here behind Adrian's walls and guards than anywhere else in Chicago. The devil you know, she thought wryly. She pulled out her phone, texting Lena. Can't come? Safe for now. 3 dots appeared immediately. You sure? I'm worried. Yes. Will explain when I can. Mara slid down the door until she sat on the cool tile floor. Outside, helicopters thrummed through the night sky, searching. The sound should have been ominous. Instead, it felt almost like a lullaby. The city's heartbeat, steady and sure. Her phone buzzed one more time. Lena. Stay smart. Stay alive. Love you. Mara pressed her forehead to her knees, letting out a long breath. The necklace hung heavy against her collarbone, a weight she couldn't shed. But maybe, just maybe, Adrian's protection would be enough to keep them breathing until they unraveled its mysteries. The helicopters continued their patrol, metal dragonflies dancing between skyscrapers. Somewhere out there, the Serranos were plotting their next move. But for tonight at least, the walls held. The wolves circled, but couldn't touch them. Mara touched the necklace's smooth stones, tracing the familiar pattern. Questions tumbled through her mind. Why this piece? What secrets did it hold? How had it ended up in a thrift store donation box? More importantly, what would it cost them to find out? The bathroom's soft lighting caught the diamonds, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls. Such a beautiful thing, to cause so much danger, to change their lives so completely in less than 24 hours. She could hear Adrian's security teams in the hallway, changing shifts. Their quiet professionalism was oddly reassuring. Whatever came next, they weren't facing it alone. Morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adrian's office, casting long shadows across his steel and glass desk. Mara wrapped her hands around a steaming cup of coffee, gathering her courage. I want to make a deal, she said. Adrian looked up from his tablet, eyebrow raised. I'm listening. I'll help track down the necklace's history, but I need something in return. She met his gaze steadily. Nate's pre-med track, fully funded, and legal protection for both of us. He studied her for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then he reached for his phone. Get me Matthews from legal. Now. Within an hour, a silver-haired lawyer arrived with a document titled Security and Scholarship Agreement. Mara read each page carefully while Adrian watched, his presence a warm weight at her back. The terms were generous: housing, full tuition, living expenses, and a monthly stipend, all contingent on their cooperation until the threat was neutralized. This protects you both legally as well, Adrian explained. You'll sign once we resolve the situation. They spent the morning hunched over the thrift store logbook, analyzing every detail. The donation batch containing the necklace had come from an estate sale broker, but coffee had smudged most of the name. Anno Liquidations, Mara read, frowning. Could be Romano, or Serrano, Adrian finished, jaw tightening. A shell company for laundering stolen goods. His tech team enhanced the security footage, but the figure dropping off the donation remained frustratingly blurred. Still, something about the stance seemed familiar to Adrian. After lunch, they moved to the study to access a private jeweler's database. Adrian pulled up the micro-etching records while Mara leaned close, the scent of his cologne making her pulse skip. Here, he said softly, showing her the tiny numbers etched into the clasp. This proves it's genuine. Each piece in that vault had a unique identifier. Their fingers brushed as she tilted the tablet for a better view. Static electricity crackled between them. I should be interrogating you differently, Adrian admitted, voice low. But I can't treat you like a suspect. Why not? Mara asked, barely breathing. He turned slightly, their faces inches apart. His eyes dropped to her lips. The air grew thick with possibility. Mara swayed forward unconsciously. Adrian's hand came up to cup her cheek. The security alarm blared, shattering the moment. They jerked apart as guards rushed in, reporting motion sensors triggered in the parking level. Adrian barked orders into his radio while Mara pressed a hand to her thundering heart. After tense minutes, the all-clear came through. Just a confused delivery driver in the wrong bay. The almost kiss hung between them like smoke, impossible to ignore, but equally impossible to acknowledge. They worked until late, professional distance restored, though Mara caught Adrian watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. At 11:30, she retreated to the guest suite, skin still tingling where his fingers had nearly touched her face. She grabbed a notepad and pen, needing to organize her thoughts. Questions filled the page. Her hand shook slightly as she wrote. The day's events tumbled through her mind. The legal agreement, hours of research, that electric moment before the alarm. She wasn't some helpless bystander anymore. She had choices, agency. The necklace had dragged her into this mess, but she'd help solve it on her terms. Mara folded the list carefully and slipped it under her pillow. Her mother used to say that sleeping on a problem helped find solutions. She hoped it was true. The city glittered beyond her window, a maze of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there were answers. Tomorrow they'd start hunting them down. She changed into borrowed silk pajamas, the fabric cool against her heated skin. The near kiss replayed in her mind. Adrian's intense gaze, the slight parting of his lips, the gravitational pull between them. Mara shook herself. Focus! The agreement protected Nate's future. That's what mattered, not the way Adrian's presence made her pulse race, or how his rare smiles transformed his whole face. She checked her phone. No messages from the diner, no suspicious activity on her accounts. The lawyers had already arranged leave from work, citing a family emergency. In a way, it was true. This dangerous new family of security teams and crime lords had claimed them, for better or worse. A soft knock startled her. Miss Lark? Security check? All clear, she called back, grateful for their diligence. She could hear them patrolling the halls, watches synchronized, weapons holstered, but ready. Adrian's promise echoed in her mind. I protect what's mine. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like armor. Mara slid between sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Despite everything exhaustion pulled at her, she touched the list under her pillow one last time, a tangible reminder of her resolve. She wouldn't be the girl things happened to. She would be the woman who helped end this mystery, protected her brother, and faced down danger with clear eyes. Tomorrow would bring new clues, new challenges. But for now, she let herself drift off. Adrian's almost touch still burning on her skin. The autumn sun hung low at 2 p.m. as Mara and Adrian walked the old Jewels district, a maze of weathered storefronts and narrow alleys where generations of craftsmen had traded precious metals and family secrets. Security teams flanked them discreetly, earpieces glinting. The hallmark should help narrow it down, Adrian explained, his shoulder brushing hers as they navigated the crowded sidewalk. These shops keep detailed records. Mara nodded, conscious of his proximity. The necklace felt heavy against her collarbone, drawing sideways glances from passers-by. They approached a shuttered repair shop, its windows dusty but the sign still advertising Fine Jewelry Services, Sturi 1932. The screech of tires shattered the afternoon quiet. A white van lurched to the curb. 4 men in Serrano colors burst out, faces hard with purpose. They moved with practiced coordination, 2 charging Adrian's guards, while the others lunged for Mara. Time seemed to slow. Rough hands grabbed her arm, yanking toward the necklace clasp. She fought back, driving her elbow into a solar plexus. Just as Adrian exploded into motion, his transformation was terrifying to witness. Gone was the controlled businessman. In his place moved a predator, elegant and lethal. He broke the first attacker's wrist with surgical precision, the crack echoing off brick walls. The man screamed, stumbling back. A gun appeared in Adrian's hand, seemingly from nowhere. He fired once into the air, the report scattering pigeons in a gray cloud. His other arm curved around Mara, pulling her against his chest, shielding her with his body. Mine, he growled, the word more threat than claim. The remaining attackers hesitated, weighing odds. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Adrian's security team moved with practiced efficiency. Papers appeared, permits, licenses, all properly stamped and dated. The Serranos recognized defeat, melting away into the maze of alleys as blue lights began reflecting off windows. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. Adrian's arm was still around her, his body radiating heat and controlled violence. She could feel his pulse racing where her back pressed to his chest. "Inside," he ordered as his men secured the perimeter. The shop's lock yielded to his key. He'd clearly planned this visit. The interior hit them with the acrid smell of scorched metal and smoke. Display cases lay shattered, glass crunching under their feet. The destruction wasn't random. Someone had searched methodically, targeting specific areas. "They were here first," Mara observed, keeping her voice steady, despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. The back room's safe gaped open, emptied of whatever it had held. She moved carefully through the wreckage, photographer's eye noting details. A fallen ledger caught her attention, wedged behind a heavy filing cabinet. She pointed it out to Adrian, who retrieved it with gloved hands. They photographed each page, focusing on entries from 2 years prior. Among routine repairs and restorations, one entry stood out: black onyx collar, clasp reset. Beside it was a symbol like a chess rook, drawn in precise strokes. "A maker's mark?" Mara asked, leaning closer. "Or a fence's sign," Adrian replied. His thumb traced the symbol thoughtfully. "Either way, it's a lead." They documented everything they could, aware of time ticking by. Adrian's security reported all clear, but the attack had everyone on edge. They left through the back door, taking a circuitous route to the waiting cars. The ride back to the penthouse was tense, with unspoken questions. Mara's cheek stung where flying glass had caught her during the fight. She noticed Adrian watching the cut in the rearview mirror, his jaw tight. By 5:45 p.m., they were back in the penthouse's secured comfort. Adrian led her to his private study, gathering first aid supplies with precise movements. He gestured for her to sit on the leather couch. "Let me see," he murmured, tilting her face toward the light. His fingers were impossibly gentle as he cleaned the cut. Such a contrast to the calculated violence she'd witnessed hours before. "Piccola farfalla coraggiosa," he breathed, so soft she almost missed it. "Tesoro mio." The Italian endearments slipped out unconsciously, making him pause. A flush colored Mara's cheeks as she recognized the tone, if not the words. Their eyes met, the moment stretching taut with possibility. She didn't pull away from his touch, but gathered her resolve. They had to maintain focus. "We keep working," she said finally, taking a small step back. "With boundaries." Adrian nodded once, understanding, and something like respect in his expression. The professional mask slipped back into place, but his eyes remained warm. They spread the photos across his desk, the rook symbol stark against aged paper. Outside the windows, Chicago's lights began winking on as evening approached. They had a new lead to follow, a symbol to trace through the city's shadowed corners. Mara touched the necklace absently, remembering the desperate grab for it during the attack. The piece was more than just jewelry now. It was a key to something dangerous enough to kill for. But with every attempt on her life, she grew more determined to uncover its secrets. Adrian made a call to his intelligence network, setting research in motion. His voice was back to business, but Mara caught him watching her with that same protective intensity from the street. The boundaries she'd requested might prove harder to maintain than either of them expected. The first aid supplies lay scattered between them, a reminder of how quickly violence could erupt. But it was also a reminder of gentle hands and whispered Italian, of protection freely given and boundaries respected. The storm rolled in as night fell, transforming Chicago's skyline into a blur of rain-smeared lights. Thunder cracked overhead, and Mara watched lightning spider across the dark sky from the penthouse's wall of windows. The weather had trapped them all inside, but somehow the confinement felt different tonight. In the gleaming kitchen, Adrian moved with surprising domesticity, pulling ingredients from stainless steel cabinets. "My mother's recipe," he said, measuring pasta into a pot of boiling water. "Simple, but good." Mara chopped garlic and basil, the knife steady in her hands. The normalcy of cooking felt surreal after the violence of the afternoon. Nate perched on a bar stool, watching them with barely concealed amusement. "This has got to be the weirdest normal I've ever felt," he commented, grinning as Adrian demonstrated the proper way to stir sauce. "Like, super dangerous mob boss makes dinner. It's like a really strange cooking show." Adrian's lips twitched. "Perhaps I missed my calling." The kitchen filled with warm aromas, garlic, herbs, tomatoes simmering. Mara caught herself relaxing into the rhythm of cooking beside Adrian, their movements unconsciously synchronized as they worked. Over steaming plates of pasta, the conversation deepened. Adrian's fingers tightened on his wine glass, As he spoke of the night, everything changed. "I'd suspected a mole," he said quietly. "Set a trap in the vault, thinking I could catch them. Sophia, my fiancée, she was supposed to be at her sister's." Pain flickered across his face. "The Serranos moved faster than I anticipated. I chose wrong, staying to protect the vault instead of escorting her myself." The guilt in his voice was raw. Mara reached across the table without thinking, her fingers brushing his wrist. "You couldn't have known." He turned his hand, catching her fingers briefly before letting go. "I should have." Thunder rolled outside as Mara shared her own story. "My father was a gambler," she said, twirling pasta on her fork. "Good at hiding it until he wasn't. One day the savings were gone, and so was he. Left me to figure out insulin costs and rent when Nate was diagnosed." She touched the necklace. "I bought this because it looked valuable, yes, but also because it felt like armor, like wearing strength around my neck." "It suits you," Adrian said softly. Their eyes met across the table, understanding passing between them. After dinner, Nate yawned his way through helping clear plates. "This was actually really nice," he said, hugging Mara. "Even with all the crazy, it felt good." He headed to bed, leaving Mara and Adrian alone. They drifted to the balcony, protected from the rain by the overhang. The storm painted the city in sheets of silver, lightning illuminating their faces in brief flashes. "I'm not good at giving up control," Adrian admitted, hands braced on the railing. "But I won't cage you. You deserve choices." Mara stepped closer, drawn by the honesty in his voice. "I'm not good at accepting help, but I'm learning when to trust it." The space between them charged with tension. Adrian turned, his hand coming up to cup her cheek where the cut had been cleaned earlier. Mara leaned into the touch, pulse quickening. Their bodies gravitated closer, the pull between them magnetic. Adrian's thumb traced her lower lip, but he didn't close the final distance. "Your choice," he murmured. "Always your choice." The respect in that pause, the clear consent he waited for, made Mara's breath catch. She swayed forward, testing the attraction sparking between them. Their lips brushed, barely a kiss, more a promise of one, before a sharp ping from Adrian's laptop broke the moment. They pulled apart slowly, the desire banked but not extinguished. The server had found something, a match for the chess rook symbol they'd photographed. "Rook & Sons Estate Liquidations," Mara read from the screen. "Founded 1985, specializing in high-end estate sales and private auctions." Adrian's expression hardened. "A Serrano shell company. They've been laundering money through estate sales for years." He pulled up business records, scanning quickly. This could be how they moved the stolen pieces. Mara printed the company's logo, the same chess rook from the jeweler's ledger, and carefully taped it into her notebook. She was building a map of connections, determined to understand how her thrift store fine-linked to murder and mayhem. Adrian made calls, voice low and commanding, as he organized teams to pull complete business records at dawn. The storm's intensity matched his focused energy, rain drumming against the windows like static. At 11:50 p.m., Mara stood in the guest suite, listening to the weather rage outside. The printed logo stared up from her notebook, another piece in the puzzle they were assembling. She clicked off the light, but sleep felt distant. The day had shifted something between them. Cooking together, sharing painful truths, that almost kiss in the rain. The boundaries she'd insisted on were blurring, complicated by growing trust and attraction. Thunder shook the building as she climbed into bed, the storm a symphony against the windows. Whatever tomorrow brought, she knew they were moving closer to answers. About the necklace, about each other, about the choices that had brought them here. Dawnlight spilled through the penthouse windows as Mara sat at the kitchen island, turning the necklace over in her hands. Adrian's voice drifted from his office, where he coordinated with the judge for the Rook Sons raid. The onyx pendant caught the morning sun, and something about its weight nagged at her. She'd always been good with puzzles, fixing things. Growing up, she'd repaired everything from toasters to bicycle chains. Now, studying the pendant closely, she felt a slight give when she pressed one side. "Can I borrow your sewing kit?" she asked the housekeeper, who returned with a small leather case. Mara selected a fine needle and grabbed a toothpick from the counter. Working carefully, she probed the barely visible seam. A soft click rewarded her efforts, and a hidden panel swung open on microscopic hinges. Inside lay a thumbnail-sized drive, sealed in protective coating. "Adrian?" she called, keeping her voice steady. "I found something." He appeared in the doorway, followed by a sharp-featured woman he introduced as Gia, his tech specialist. Gia's eyes narrowed at the drive as she pulled out a specialized laptop. Air-gapped system, Gia explained, connecting the drive through a read-only port. Nothing gets in or out without permission. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as files populated the screen. The room temperature seemed to drop as they read. Bank login credentials, schedule sheets, payment routes through offshore accounts, all leading back to one name, Luca Romano. Adrian's consigliere had orchestrated everything. The vault heist, the murder. 2 years of lies while serving as Adrian's right hand. Mara watched Adrian's face as he processed the betrayal. His expression turned to marble, but his eyes blazed with contained fury. Grief carved lines around his mouth, not just for his fiancée, but for the years of misplaced trust. "Thank you," he said finally, voice controlled. "You've given us the evidence we needed." He touched her shoulder briefly. "I'll handle this. You won't be caught in the fallout." "How?" Mara asked. "Luca has to attend the Children's Hospital charity gala tonight. Too many political connections watching. He can't skip it without raising red flags." Adrian's smile was winter cold. Perfect venue to confront him. Security everywhere, metal detectors at every door. He won't risk violence with witnesses. Gia worked steadily, copying and encrypting the files. "I'll have full documentation ready before the gala. He won't slither out of this one." The morning blurred into afternoon as they prepared. Adrian made calls, positioning people and resources. Mara helped Gia organize the evidence, her diner experience with multitasking proving useful. At 5:30, a stylist arrived with garment bags. She presented Mara with a black column dress that managed to be both elegant and practical, along with a dramatic cape that could conceal a knife sheath if needed. "Only if you're comfortable," Adrian said, watching her reaction. "Taking you as my date accomplishes 2 things. It publicly places you under my protection, and the venue's security measures keep everyone safer." He paused. "But it's your choice." Mara considered the dress, the situation, the man before her. He'd proven trustworthy despite his dangerous world. He'd protected Nate, respected her boundaries, and shown her both his strength and his pain. "I'll go," she said, "but no more lies between us, not even small ones." "You have my word." The promise rang with finality. The stylist worked efficiently, turning Mara's practical waitress appearance into something sophisticated, but not overdone. The dress fit perfectly, the cape adding drama without restricting movement. While the stylist put finishing touches on her hair, Mara watched Adrian review security plans with his team. He moved with contained energy, like a storm gathering strength. The betrayal had wounded him deeply, but he channeled the pain into precision. Gia arrived with a secure tablet. "Everything's ready. Files, backups, and a kill switch if he tries anything digital." She nodded to Mara. "Good work with the necklace. Most people wouldn't have noticed that latch." "I'm good with mechanical things," Mara said. "Always have been." "It saved all our lives," Adrian said quietly. "That skill of yours." He crossed to her, offering his hand. "Are you ready?" Mara took a final look in the mirror. The woman reflected there looked elegant, confident, but her eyes were still her own, sharp and determined. The necklace, now empty of its secret, still gleamed at her throat like armor. "Ready," she said, accepting his hand. "Let's end this." The penthouse hummed with preparation as security teams coordinated positions. Nate was safely ensconced in the game room with guards and his tutor, protected from whatever fallout might come. Mara touched the necklace once more, thinking how a simple thrift store purchase had unveiled a 2-year-old betrayal and murder. Adrian helped her with the cape, his hands lingering briefly on her shoulders. The weight of the evening ahead settled around them, but Mara felt strangely calm. They had evidence, they had a plan, and most importantly, they had truth between them now. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Inside, Adrian studied their reflection in the polished doors. "Whatever happens tonight," he said, "know that finding that necklace, it's given me back something I thought was lost. Justice, hope." He met her eyes in the mirror. "And perhaps something more." The grand ballroom of the Lakeshore Children's Fund Gala sparkled under massive crystal chandeliers, their light catching on designer gowns and polished cufflinks. At precisely 8 o'clock, Adrian guided Mara through the entrance, his hand steady at the small of her back. Camera flashes erupted, society photographers eager to capture Chicago's most dangerous bachelor with an unknown beauty. Mara felt the weight of curious stares but kept her chin high. The black dress moved like water around her legs, the cape adding dramatic flair to each step. Adrian looked lethal in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Every Inch, the powerful Don these people feared and courted. Mr. Vitale, a silver-haired society matron, approached, dripping in diamonds. "Who is your lovely guest?" Adrian's smile was calculated charm. "This is Mara Lark. She's under my protection." His voice carried just far enough to reach key ears. The declaration was both warning and claim, marking her as untouchable. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Adrian turned to her with a slight bow. "Shall we?" On the dance floor, he drew her close. Proper form, but intimate. His hand spanned her waist as they moved in perfect sync. Mara could feel the controlled power in his frame, the way his eyes constantly scanned the room even as he led her through the steps. "Relax your shoulders," he murmured. "You're doing beautifully." "Easy for you to say. You probably learned ballroom dancing between target practice and hostile takeovers." His quiet laugh surprised them both, but his attention sharpened as they turned, focusing on something over her shoulder. Following his gaze, she glimpsed Luca Romano holding court near the bar, perfectly at ease in his designer tuxedo. The dance ended. Adrian kissed her hand with old-world courtesy, then excused himself to greet an old friend. Mara drifted to the edge of the dance floor, accepting a flute of champagne from a passing waiter. She watched Adrian weave through the crowd with predatory grace. Near a private corridor, Luca intercepted him. From her position, Mara could see the consigliere's practiced smile, the way his gaze kept darting to the necklace at her throat. She couldn't hear their exchange, but she saw Luca palm something to Adrian. A phone, small and dark. Whatever Luca said made Adrian's posture shift subtly. Most wouldn't notice, but Mara had learned to read the minute changes in his body language. This was contained rage, carefully masked. Adrian pocketed the phone and returned to her side, smoothly inserting them into a group discussing donation pledges. His hand at her waist was possessive, protective. When she tried to catch his eye, he squeezed gently. Reassurance or warning, she wasn't sure. "The Vitale Foundation pledges $5 million to the new pediatric wing," Adrian announced, earning appreciative murmurs. His charity work was impeccable cover for less legal enterprises. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of small talk and social niceties. Mara observed the intricate dance of power and influence, noting how Adrian maintained his public face while orchestrating something via text. She saw him dispatch 2 security teams with subtle hand signals. "What's wrong?" she asked directly when they had a moment alone. He raised her hand to his lips, brushing a kiss across her knuckles. "It's handled, Kara." His voice was gentle but final. "Trust me." At 10:45, they returned to the penthouse. In the elevator, Mara shifted her weight and felt something catch under her heel. She waited until she reached her suite to investigate, kicking off the elegant shoes. There, pressed into the sole, was a wafer-thin tracking device. Professional grade, expertly concealed. She turned it over in her fingers, remembering Adrian's insistence on having the stylist bring shoes instead of letting her wear her own. The betrayal hit hard. He'd planted it for safety? Without telling her, without asking, just like every other man who'd decided what was best for her. Her hands shook slightly as she pried the tracker free. The trust they'd built, the boundaries she'd drawn. He'd stepped right over them. She tucked the device into her clutch, jaw set. The gorgeous dress suddenly felt like a costume. She'd played her part in his power play, let herself believe in his promises of honesty. But he was still the man who commanded an empire through control and fear. The mirror reflected her flushed cheeks, the spark of anger in her eyes. She touched the necklace that had started everything. No longer armor, but a reminder. No matter how gentle his touch or sincere his words, Adrian Vitale was used to taking what he wanted. Well, she wasn't some pawn to be moved around his chessboard. She'd confront him about the tracker, make him understand that protection didn't mean possession. If he wanted her trust, he'd have to earn it, with complete honesty this time. A soft knock at her door made her straighten her spine. Probably Adrian, checking on her after their return. She gripped the tracker in her palm, its edges pressing into her skin. Time to remind the most dangerous man in Chicago that she wouldn't be handled, protected, or tracked without her consent. Even if part of her understood his fears, even if her heart raced when he touched her, she refused to surrender her autonomy to anyone, no matter how seductive the cage. At 11:10 p.m., Mara strode down the penthouse hallway, tracker clutched in her palm. Her silk gown whispered against the marble floors as she approached Adrian's office. The door was ajar, warm light spilling out. He looked up from his desk, already loosening his bow tie. His eyes tracked her movement, noting her rigid posture. "Care to explain this?" She placed the tracker on his desk with deliberate calm. Adrian didn't pretend ignorance. A precaution. A violation, she corrected. You planted this without telling me, after promising no more lies. It wasn't a lie. It was a lie of omission. Her voice stayed level, though anger simmered beneath. You don't get to track me like property. He stood, prowling around the desk. The Serranos are still out there. I need to keep you safe. By treating me like everyone else you control? She stepped back. I trusted you. I agreed to your protection, but I won't be managed. Mara. His voice softened dangerously. Everything I do is to protect you. Everything you do is to maintain control, she shot back. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from Nate. I'm downstairs with security for a snack. Something cold slid down her spine. Nate never used proper punctuation in texts. Never. She bolted for the door. Adrian caught her arm. What's wrong? Nate's text. Something's wrong. He doesn't write like that. They raced to the elevator just as it dinged open. Two men in security uniforms she didn't recognize stepped out. Before she could retreat, one lunged, pressing a chemical-soaked cloth to her face. She fought, kicks connecting, but the world tilted sideways. Through dimming vision, she saw Adrian charging forward, heard his roar of rage. Too late. The fake guards dragged her into a service corridor as alarms began to wail. Her consciousness flickered like a bad bulb as they rushed through back passages and loading docks. She came to on a sleek speedboat cutting through dark water. Luca Romano's familiar face swam into focus, lit by the city's glow. Welcome back, Ms. Lark. His smile was serpentine. Or should I say, daughter of Thomas Lark. The name hit like a slap. Her father. What are you talking about? Your father was quite useful to the Serranos, handled their books beautifully before his gambling debts became problematic. Luca examined his manicured nails. The thrift store donation scheme was his idea originally. Clean way to move certain items, like that lovely necklace you're wearing. Horror dawned. You used me as bait. Smart girl. The necklace was perfect. We knew Adrian would recognize it. Then it was just a matter of patience. He gestured to the massive cargo ship looming ahead. You'll have plenty of time to contemplate family ties on your way to Venezuela. Rough hands hauled her aboard the ship. Steel shackles bit into her wrists as they secured her in the hold. Luca snapped a photo with his phone. A parting gift for Adrian, coordinates included, of course. He pocketed the phone. Ship leaves at 4 a.m. sharp. Back in the penthouse, Adrian confirmed Nate was safe with Daniela, his most trusted lieutenant. Then he stared at Luca's taunting photo, Mara in chains, city lights visible through a porthole behind her. His hands trembled with fury, not just at Luca's betrayal, but at himself. He'd tried to protect her through control, and in doing so, he'd pushed away the one person who'd seen past his ice-cold exterior, who'd challenged him to be better. The woman who'd thawed him was now paying for his mistakes. At 1 a.m., the ship's horn bellowed into the night. In the dim hold, Mara forced herself to focus through fear and rage. The guards passed every 12 to 15 minutes. She counted their footsteps, memorized their patterns. Her fingers closed around a broken screw she'd found on the floor grating. It wasn't much, but it was something. A tool. A chance. I will survive, she whispered to herself, the words a shield against terror. Until Adrian comes, or until I save myself. She shifted, testing the chains methodically. The shackles were tight, but not cutting off circulation. The bolt holding them looked worn. She could work without that. More footsteps approached, heavy, military, precise. She tucked the screw into her palm and went still. 2 guards passed, speaking rapid Spanish. Their shadows stretched across the floor before disappearing. 13 minutes until they returned. She had to be patient, stay sharp, think like the survivor she was. The ship's engine thrummed beneath her, a constant reminder that time was running out. Venezuela waited at the end of this journey. She refused to let that be her destination. She thought of Nate, praying he was truly safe, of Adrian, whose protection had turned possessive, but whose touch still made her pulse race, of her father, whose sins had somehow led to this moment. Another set of footsteps. Different guard, lighter tread. 12 minutes this time. She logged the information away, building her mental map of this floating prison. The screw pressed against her palm, small but solid, like the first key she'd ever earned at the diner, a symbol of trust, of responsibility, of survival. The horn moaned again, its deep voice carrying across Chicago's waters. In 4 hours, they'd leave port. Before then, she had to find a way. Trust Adrian to come, yes, but trust herself more. She was Mara Lark. She'd raised her brother alone, worked double shifts, faced down a Mafia don. She wouldn't break here in this steel-wrapped darkness. The next guard rotation approached. She closed her eyes, steadied her breathing, and waited. Counting steps, measuring time, holding on to hope like a blade. The war room's steel walls reflected Adrian's glacier-cold fury as he worked his phone at 1:20 a.m., every call precise and lethal. The microdrive's content spread across multiple screens, a digital web of betrayal and opportunity. Send account details to Serrano's second-in-command, he ordered his tech team. Show him exactly how much his boss has been skimming. His voice carried the quiet certainty of a man who'd already won. Then hit the others. Within minutes, phones lit up across Chicago. Serrano lieutenants received proof of their leader's theft, millions cashed in Caribbean accounts while they lived on scraps. 2 captains broke ranks immediately, feeding Adrian's team the cargo ship specs and guard rotations. 28 men on board, reported his security chief. Heavy presence on the main deck, lighter below. Adrian's fingers flew across a secure laptop, compiling a dossier. Agent Sarah Chen had helped him before, their arrangement simple. He kept violence contained, she kept investigations focused elsewhere. Tonight, he'd give her Luca's money laundering empire in exchange for Nate's permanent protection. Send it, he commanded. The file disappeared into federal servers. Rain started falling as his strike team geared up. 16 men in black tactical gear, weapons checked and double-checked. Adrian strapped on his own vest, each movement economical. The weight of his pistol felt right against his ribs. Sir, his driver murmured. Fast boats ready? They moved like shadows through the marina, boarding a sleek vessel built for speed and silence. The cargo ship's bulk loomed ahead, its running lights reflecting off the churning water. Time compressed into tactical fragments. 2:45 a.m. Approach vector confirmed. 3:15 a.m. Teams in position. 3:30 a.m. Go signal. The raid unfolded with practiced precision. Power to deck, sea cut exactly on schedule. Plunging corridors into darkness, broken only by emergency strips. Adrian's team split smoothly, some heading to secure escape routes, others moving to contain the crew. He led the push toward the hold himself, every step silent despite the steel grating underfoot. The rain drummed harder overhead, masking their movement. His earpiece crackled with status updates. Port side clear. Engine room in sight. 2 tangos neutralized. Then he heard it, a sharp intake of breath that wasn't radio static. He pressed against a wall, peering around the corner. The hold's emergency lights cast sickly shadows, and there she was. Mara stood with forced stillness, a guard's gun pressed to her temple. Her eyes met Adrian's, carrying not fear, but calculation. Even now she was planning. Show yourself, the guard called in heavily accented English, or she dies. Adrian stepped into the light, movements deliberate. He laid his weapon down slowly, hands raised. You want to negotiate? His voice carried through the hold. Let's negotiate. Territory, money, my personal surrender. Each word fell like a hammer stroke. Take the city. Leave her. She is my life. He saw the guard's grip shift slightly. Uncertainty. Greed, warring with orders. That microscopic hesitation was all Mara needed. Her hand flashed up, driving something small and sharp into the guard's wrist. The gun discharged with a deafening crack, the bullet whining off steel above them. Adrian was already moving. He slammed into Mara, taking them both behind a shipping crate as more shots peppered their previous position. His team breached the hold from multiple points, precise bursts of gunfire cutting through the chaos. Stay down, he ordered, but she was already moving with him, reading his intentions like they'd trained together for years. They crouched behind the crate, breathing hard. The screw from the grating, he asked between shots. Always keep a backup plan. Despite everything, her lips quirked slightly. More gunfire erupted from the far end of the hold. Through his earpiece came urgent updates. Luca spotted heading for engines. Ship's listing starboard, hydraulics compromised. A bullet sparked off their cover. Adrian returned fire, his shots precise despite the rolling deck. Mara found a fallen guard's weapon and checked it with familiar hands. Since when do you shoot? He asked, reloading. Since my father disappeared and left me alone in Southside. She lined up on a shadow and squeezed the trigger. The target dropped. "We need to move!" The ship's alarms began howling, a piercing wail that meant systems were failing. The list became more pronounced as damaged hydraulics leaked. Water sloshed audibly beyond the hull. They pushed forward together, covering each other with an instinctive rhythm. Adrian's team secured their flanks, professional and silent. The engine corridor waited ahead, thrumming with mechanical life. Their hands found each other in the chaos, not seeking comfort but confirming presence. Partnership. They were blood-splattered and breathing hard, but unbroken. No speeches passed between them. None were needed. They had moved beyond words to something deeper, the shared grit of survivors who chose each other. The engine room's hatch loomed ahead. Somewhere beyond it, Luca was running. Adrian and Mara exchanged one look, checked their weapons, and moved forward into the steam-filled corridor. Behind them, water continued rising in the compromised holds. Above, the rain drummed against steel like ammunition. The ship's horn sounded again, a mournful cry into the pre-dawn darkness. It was 3:50 a.m., and the hunt was not over. The engine room's catwalks vibrated with the ship's dying systems. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes, creating a ghostly maze of metal and vapor. At 3:55 a.m., Luca's footsteps echoed ahead, his shadow dancing between emergency lights as he sprinted toward the maintenance hatch. Mara's mind raced, piecing together the ship's architecture she'd studied during her captivity. The guard rotations had given her time to map escape routes, to note the manual override system that could seal any section. "The secondary valve," she whispered to Adrian, pointing to a wheel mechanism. "Turn it clockwise. It'll lock down that whole section." Adrian moved without hesitation, muscles straining against the rusted valve. Metal screamed against metal. Mara spotted the control lever she'd noticed earlier, a failsafe designed to prevent flooding from spreading between compartments. She planted her boot and kicked hard. The lever slammed down with a satisfying clang. Luca reached the hatch just as it sealed, the hydraulic locks engaging with a final hiss. He spun, face contorted with rage, and opened fire. Bullets sparked off railings and pipes, filling the air with ricochets and steam. "I gave everything to the family," Luca's voice cracked with desperation. 20 years of loyalty while you inherited it all." Adrian advanced through the chaos with predator's grace, each step calculated. Steam swirled around him like a shroud. "Loyalty?" His voice carried deadly quiet. "You killed Sophia. Used Mara as bait. Threatened a child." More wild shots. Adrian didn't flinch. He moved like water through the gunfire, closing distance. When Luca's magazine clicked empty, Adrian struck, a brutal economy of motion that sent the empty weapon clattering into darkness. The fight ended quickly. Luca slumped against the sealed hatch, blood trickling from his mouth. His eyes held no repentance, only bitter hatred until the end. Above decks, phones buzzed across Chicago as Adrian's network activated. Serrano lieutenants, their offshore accounts suddenly vulnerable, broadcast coded messages, alliances dissolved, territories redrawn. Cars and trucks moved through pre-dawn streets as criminal enterprises relocated, rather than risk open war. Adrian worked his own phone, one-handed, the other keeping Mara close. His messages were brief, precise, directing the chaos into controlled channels, minimizing bloodshed through carefully leaked intel and strategic pressure points. "Your federal contact?" Mara asked, watching him filter the microdrive's data. "Agent Chen. We understand each other's boundaries." Adrian encrypted the files, stripping any trace that could lead back to Mara or Nate. This gives her enough for targeted raids without starting a war. Distant sirens began to echo across the water. Paramilitary units would swarm the docks soon, but Adrian's team had already prepared their extraction. They moved efficiently through the dying ship, emerging onto the rain-slick deck where fast boats waited in shadow. The eastern sky was beginning to pale, first light touching Lake Michigan with tentative fingers. They reached a quiet pier at 5:30 a.m., the violence of the night feeling suddenly distant. Adrian shrugged out of his coat, still warm from his body, and draped it over Mara's shoulders. She swayed slightly, exhaustion finally catching up, and let herself lean against his solid presence. "Nate?" Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Is he—" "See for yourself!" Adrian held up his phone, showing a live feed from the penthouse security system. Nate slept peacefully in his bed, Daniela keeping silent watch from the doorway. The sight broke something in Mara's careful control. She turned into Adrian's chest, allowing herself exactly 30 seconds of tears, for the fear, the violence, the weight of everything finally lifting. His arms tightened around her, one hand cradling the back of her head while she shuddered. At precisely 30 seconds, she straightened, wiped her eyes, and looked up at him. Her voice was stronger now, certain. "Take me home." The lake breeze caught her hair, carrying away the last of the gunsmoke smell. Behind them, sirens drew closer as dawn crept over the city. But in this moment, on this quiet pier, they had found their own kind of peace, born of shared battles and chosen trust. Adrian's security detail materialized from the shadows, leading them toward waiting vehicles. The city was waking up to a changed underworld landscape, but that was tomorrow's concern. For now, there was only the warmth of his coat around her shoulders, the solid strength of him at her side, and the promise of home ahead. They walked together through the gathering dawn, neither leading nor following, but moving as equals who had forged something unbreakable in the crucible of the night. Every step took them further from the violence behind them and closer to the sanctuary they'd built together, where Nate waited safe, where wounds could heal, where they could finally lower their guards and simply be. The lake lapped quietly against the pier's supports, washing away traces of the night's battles. First light painted the clouds in delicate pink and gold, a gentler palette than the harsh emergency lights and muzzle flashes that had illuminated their fight for survival. Chicago's skyline stretched before them, familiar towers wearing the fresh colors of morning like a promise of renewal. Adrian's hand found hers as they reached the car, his touch carrying all the tenderness that his public persona concealed. It was the touch of a man who had found something worth protecting, worth changing for. Mara's fingers interlaced with his, accepting both the man he had been and the one he was becoming. Dawn had come, they had survived, and they were going home. Morning light streamed through the penthouse windows at 9 a.m., catching dust motes in golden beams. Dr. Santos, Adrian's discreet physician, worked with gentle efficiency to clean and bandage Mara's injuries from the ship, a cut above her eyebrow, bruised ribs, rope burns on her wrists. From the kitchen came the cheerful clatter of Nate making his famous chocolate chip pancakes, the sweet smell of victory breakfast filling the air. He'd insisted on cooking the moment they'd returned, channeling his relief into comfort food. "These bruises will fade in a week," Dr. Santos said, applying arnica gel. "The ribs need rest, but nothing's broken." Mara nodded, wincing slightly as she pulled her shirt back down. Through the open door, she could see Adrian in his office, conducting a series of rapid-fire meetings with his captains. His voice carried occasionally. Firm declarations of new protocol, territory assignments, protection priorities. Daniela stood at his right hand, her military bearing and unflinching integrity, a stark contrast to Luca's oily charm. Adrian had promoted her immediately, trusting her to help reshape the organization into something that protected rather than bled their city. "Done," Dr. Santos announced, packing up her kit. "Take it easy for a few days." "Fat chance of that," Nate called from the kitchen, flipping a perfect pancake. "She'll be trying to work tomorrow." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Adrian said from the doorway, his captains filing out behind him. He'd shed his tactical gear for a crisp white shirt, but shadows of the night's violence lingered in his eyes. "Meeting's finished?" Mara asked. "For now, Daniela's implementing the new command structure." He crossed to her, careful of her injuries. "The organization will evolve. Protection over predation, family over fear." Nate appeared with a towering plate of pancakes, chocolate chips forming smiley faces. "Less talking, more eating, doctor's orders." They gathered around the kitchen island, this makeshift family forged in fire. Sunlight warmed the marble counters as they passed syrup and butter, the simple ritual of sharing breakfast somehow more intimate than all the violence they'd survived. When Nate ducked away to shower, Adrian touched Mara's hand. "Come with me. There's something we need to discuss." In his office, he retrieved a velvet box from his desk. The diamond and onyx necklace gleamed inside, no longer a symbol of loss and betrayal, but something new. "I failed you," he said quietly. The tracker, the half-truths, the weight of old guilt that made me see threats everywhere. His fingers traced the box's edge. "I won't ask for blind obedience. I'm asking for a future, one we build together." He placed a document beside the necklace. "A true partnership agreement. Any decision affecting you or Nate requires your input and consent. Equal voice, equal power." Mara studied him, seeing both the dangerous man who'd torn apart a ship to find her and the one who'd given his coat against the dawn chill. "I have terms," she said. "Complete transparency. Nate's education comes first. No compromises. And I need veto power over any moves that endanger civilians." "Done." no hesitation. You understand what you're offering? I won't be a silent partner. I'm counting on it. The corner of his mouth lifted. You've never been silent about anything. She lifted the necklace, letting it catch the light. And this? A promise if you want it. Not ownership, partnership. Mara touched the diamonds, remembering how they'd first drawn her at the thrift store. You're still the most dangerous man I know. To everyone but you. That's what makes this work. She met his eyes. I choose this. Not the cage, not the protection. You. He helped her fasten the necklace, his touch lingering on her neck. The weight felt different now, like armor freely chosen rather than chains. 6 months later, Sicilian sunlight painted the coast in honey gold as waves lapped at weathered rocks. A small gathering of their closest allies, now friends, witnessed their seaside ceremony. The necklace had been transformed into a locket holding photos of their unconventional family. Adrian's empire had evolved too, streamlined and strategic, protecting their territory without the old brutality. Lena caught the bouquet, laughing as she checked her phone. She'd made the next flight after Mara's text. Made it. Happy. The ceremony was simple, their vows private, no flowery promises, just truth. You're mine as a vow, Adrian murmured, his forehead touching hers. Mara smiled against his lips, as equals. Later, they walked the shore, hand in hand, bare feet in cool sand. Tomorrow they'd fly back to Chicago, where Nate started his pre-med summer program. Their world remained dangerous to outsiders, but between them, they'd built something unbreakable, a sanctuary of chosen trust and hard-won love. The setting sun painted the waves copper and rose. Mara wore Adrian's jacket against the evening, breeze, the locket warm against her skin. They'd forged their own path between darkness and light, power and protection, finding balance in each other's strength. Their footprints traced parallel lines in the wet sand, neither leading nor following. The tide would wash them away, but the path they'd chosen together remained clear. Forward, always forward, into the future they'd fight to protect. Behind them, laughter drifted from their wedding celebration. Ahead lay their city, their family, their shared empire, built on evolution rather than destruction. They walked toward it together, equals in love and power, their dangerous fairy tale transformed into something real and lasting. The waves whispered secrets to the shore, and the golden light blessed their joined hands. They had found their way home,